episode of Progress, Potential, and Possibilities, discussions with fascinating people designing a better tomorrow for all of us. I'm your host, Ira Pastor. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of our show, bringing you another fascinating guest today who is helping to create a better tomorrow on many different fronts. Today, we have the honor of being joined by Iris van der Veken, who is Executive Director and Board Member of the Responsible Jewellery Council, which is the world's leading standard-setting organization for the jewelry industry, ultimately promoting standards that underpin people's trust in the worldwide industry. It was founded back in 2005 by 14 different member organizations, including the biggest names, including Cartier, Tiffany, De Beers, Rio Tinto. The list goes on and on. With her University of Antwerp Bachelor of Law degree, Iris is a coalition builder. She has over 20 years of global experience working in technology, diamonds and jewelry, fashion, and government. She was actively involved in the development of the Responsible Jewellery Council Code of Practices and managed the first RJC pilot audit in partnership with SGS. They're the world's leading inspection, verification, testing, and certification company. She also established and chaired the network of the United Nations Global Compact in Belgium in partnership with the Belgian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Development Cooperation, chaired the Consultative and Advisory Board of the Office of Children's Rights Commissioner in Flanders, and was honored by the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Foreign Trade and European Affairs of Belgium for initiating the Global Compact and for her work in promoting corporate social responsibility, ultimately with a focus on human rights, including children's rights and the role of business. In addition to all of that, she's also been a Special Olympics volunteer since the early 90s. She occasionally runs marathons, and she has an addiction not just to jewelry, but also to chocolate. We'll get into some of that later on. But all that being said, Iris van der Veken, thank you so much for taking the time to come on our show.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me today, and I'm really delighted to have this conversation with you.
It's wonderful to have you. I love to start off just by giving you the floor for a little bit to talk a little bit more about you. If you could just take us into your background story, things like where you grew up, when you first developed interest in law, international relations, and a bit of your interest in corporate sustainable responsibility. I think that'd be a great way to get started.
So actually, I was born in Belgium, in Aalst, which is a small town. And pretty much of my whole youth, I was living in Belgium, except during the 80s, we went for a period of 3 years to the United States, to Washington, D.C. And of course, that had a very big influence on me because, you know, you're a teenager, you're in high school, you have to make new friends, you have to adopt in a more international environment. And I did come from a small town. At that moment, I didn't even know one word of English. So my brother and I, we really had to, I had to show strength and courage to be able to go to school there. And we met lovely people, and I'm still in contact with many of my friends in Washington. So that definitely had a big impact on myself. And then, of course, you're 18 years old and you have to decide what's next in your life to go and study. And I still believe, for anyone who is 17 or 18 years old, that's a very big decision to take. And it wasn't like I was thinking, I'm going to become a lawyer and save the world. I actually didn't know. But I did decide to study law because I thought, well, it's going to give me a very good baseline of understanding of what's going on in the world. And then I took it from there. I never practiced law, but I went to continue to study in corporate communications and international relations. So that's a bit about, what I studied. And then, of course, I always say you've got to think about the steps you take in your career. But my first big role was at Real Software, which was a technology company. And I started at the Human Resources department. And quite young, I had a big responsibility there. And I learned a lot because this was a company that skyrocketed. So they were very successful, employer of choice. Then they bought a company in the US. The stock went down, big crisis. And actually everybody that originally I had hired, we had to restructure and let them go. And that was very brutal because I also learned a lot about, the reality of business and also the impact on people's lives. And after 3 years, I decided to step away And that's how I came into the diamond business, which was actually coincidental because I met one of the CEOs. He was looking for someone in human resources. And this was very new to the industry. And we're talking now about early 2000. And so I started for an Indian family business, but yeah, over, 1 billion sales, right? So it was a family business that, wasn't maybe really a family business, but 15,000 people, 14 entities around the world. Mm. And again, I started there in human resources. But at the same time, the Beers started their program, which was called the Best Practice Principles. And this was groundbreaking because they were asking their suppliers to implement responsible business practices. And it was the first time also that facilities would be audited by third-party external audits. And this was really groundbreaking because here you have a very different relationship between a client and a supplier that is actually asking, if you want to get diamonds from us, you have to implement these practices. And I volunteered to go to London, do the training. And I must say that I fell in love with the topic. I thought this is going to change the industry because this is not about a tick box exercise. This is going to really drive change in management systems, and companies will have to redesign their organizations and their factories and their offices to be able to implement this. And so I started in Antwerp, went to South Africa, and then went all over the world to implement these practices. And I think that was a huge learning curve. Very grateful for that experience. I also believe that I was very much empowered. And I think you should never forget that, in your career when people help you move and evolve. So it was a very big learning experience. Then went into fashion. And I think it's good sometimes to step out of another industry to learn from what other industries are doing. And actually, it taught me a lot about how there's a common denominator. If you look at issues like human rights and climate and product integrity, all industries have those same issues. And often you will see that certain facilities around the world are also in the same region. So I very much believe in cross-sector collaboration. And I also believe there's a huge opportunity there to learn, what we can do also together as a coalition in certain regions in the world to contribute to development. I think that those are a few of the milestones. And then, of course, I came to the RJC, and I'm really grateful to be leading the Responsible Jewellery Council because, I very much believe in our organization. And like you said in the introduction, it was founded in 2005. Sustainability was not yet a hype, yet you had these CEOs with a pioneer vision to say we need to establish a standard that is integrated from mining to retail, and that will give a solution to companies to integrate sustainability at the core of their business strategy. And today, I'm proud to say that we have almost 1,600 companies in 71 countries, and we had 20% growth despite COVID.
It's been an amazing time, and that's been a fascinating journey. I mean, I guess I haven't been too many places you haven't been on it, but it's a fascinating time for you and your industry. It's interesting because you were talking about sort of what you learned from other sectors, and I come out of the pharmaceutical industry, and I think to myself, sort of looking at what you've put together here. You're sitting at a table, and you have Cartier and Tiffany and De Beers. I can't think of bringing together all the pharmaceutical companies to do anything together. Talk a little bit about how you. Talk a little about the Responsible Jewellery Council in general, and then how you ultimately develop consensus with these 14 or so giants of the international jewelry industry.
Well, first of all, look, the Responsible Jewellery Council has gone through its own journey. And I'm always say we are, I think, a very mature organization today. And that takes time because if you look at it, 2005 and the world today, the world has definitely changed. Yep. And what we call our code of practices, because I think it's important for the people that are listening, what is the process? Well, a company becomes, asks to become member. A due diligence process will take place. We will accept the application. And then a company will have the time to implement the code of practices which is a very robust code that has sections on legal compliance, human rights, labor practices, health and safety, product integrity, climate, etc. And then the company will ask third-party accredited independent auditors to come on site and look at the management systems. In other words, talk to the employees, talk to the workers in the factories, look at really if there's a culture of sustainability, I call it. It's not a tick box exercise. It's not about having your policies and procedures. It's about how are those policies and procedures really implemented. And I think the good news is what I see is that, certification is a momentum, right? And it's really important that companies more and more see the certification as a learning opportunity where auditors step in, where of course there's never perfectionism. I always say if a company tells me, we have no issues, well, I think then something is very strange because supply chains are very challenging. They're long, they're multi-tier. So a company will always have issues, but the matter of the fact is, how are you handling those issues? What are the systems that you have in place to look for remediation? Do you have a long-term plan to always know more about your wider supply chain? And what steps are you taking with your suppliers and subcontractors to really try to create that, community of confidence? And we also at Responsible Jewellery Council, we saw the code of practices evolve and that's of course because of different expectations of society, consumers, but also regulations. And the 2019 update is aligned with the OECD due diligence and the UN guiding principles on business and human rights, which are really two very important international instruments that strengthen this code. So it's not an easy exercise, but I think the good news is we see that companies see absolutely the business value, that it's a tool to help them integrate sustainability as part of their core strategy. Now, that being said, what do we see today? And I think for us, I always say the strategy of the RJC is based on three key pillars. And one is, here we have almost 1,600 companies, and you're so right. We've got, the most magnificent brands of the world, Chanel, Billiton, Tiffany, Hermes, IWC, I mean, you name it. But all my members matter. And I am very proud of many small enterprises in India, in Africa, Sri Lanka, wherever, that are also committed to this code. And actually, it is our role as an organization to see that everyone steps up and that the standard is implemented and that you always do a little bit better. And that's why we've invested a lot in education, in tools, but also in more help desk. And we're going through a full digital transformation to help our members better. Because I think that's our responsibility, that we need to help them advance. You can't look back, you can't go back, you need to go step by step ahead, and that takes time, and that's a process of continuous improvement. Second, we believe we also have a critical role in advocacy for positive change. Here we have 1,600 companies. They have different stories to tell. So how can we lead on the meaningful conversations that matter? And that's why we work very closely with the OECD, with the EU, European Commission, but also, with United Nations Global Compact, with organizations like the World Diamond Council and CIPCHO, etc., because no one can do this alone. And I think it's really important that you see sustainability not in an isolated manner and that you work in a coalition, because you can do a lot more if you do it together. So I believe very much in partnerships. And that brings me to the next, the third pillar of our strategy, which is really about impact and partnership for progress. Because here we have a unique opportunity as an organization with such an enormous scope of companies to really help shape a better world. And this is not about, this is not a cliche, but really through data and through measurement. So in 2019, we worked very hard on what we call the Roadmap 2030. And I invite the listeners to go to the website and look at it, which is actually a roadmap that talks about how can the industry contribute to the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And for the people that don't know about the 17 SDGs, well, this is really the common agenda of sustainability of the world. In 2015, finally, 193 countries agreed to say, well, let's have this roadmap to humanity to leave no one behind. And these 17 goals are actually an excellent framework for any company to start its journey. And where are we fitting in? Well, we believe we need to help companies understand the goals and say, look at how can you contribute to the goals. And some of the goals we believe are very important for the jewelry industry is, for example, gender, SDG 5, logic, right? 90% of the purchases are influenced by women. But how can we look at the barriers in the industry and how can we really integrate empowerment of women and more broader inclusion to the agenda of the CEOs of the global jewelry and watch industry? 8, decent labor. That's a no-brainer. I see that, there's a lot of good work being done in direct operations, but I think we need to continue to go one step further, further in the supply chain and the wider network. 12, responsible production and consumption. 13, climate. 16, peace, of course, and then 17, partnerships for the goals. So yeah, we believe that we have a great opportunity there to show progress and to tell the good stories, but also to acknowledge, where we need to do more. And I think where we definitely need to step up is, we need to focus further on the human rights due diligence, because I think in an industry that is so about beauty and emotions, it's really important that we take care of people.
Yeah, I think that's it's extremely at the RJC website. You mentioned how important the jewelry has always had this very special role in people's lives in terms of, as you're saying, emotional significance, personal significance, and now, as you're mentioning, the SDGs. That it's very different now, and there's another part of that purchase now in 2022. Well, as we enter 2022, about what this purchase means for the rest of the world and the community. And that's also very interested. In addition to all your responsibilities at RJC, you're also involved in this other organization, Diamonds Do Good, where you are working with the community, and it's a long chain, as I guess people are aware, whether it's talking diamonds or other precious stones from the communities that source them and their distribution and everything to the retail and in countries like this. Talk a little bit about Diamonds Do Good, if you will.
Well, I'm super proud to be a board member of Diamonds Do Good, because Diamonds Do Good is really a wonderful, inspiring organization that the mission is really to support initiatives that develop and empower people in diamond communities worldwide. And what I find so amazing is that they are really looking, on how diamond companies and jewelers more broadly can show positive impact to development. And, they do a lot of excellent projects in providing youth with high quality education, including leadership development and entrepreneurial skills building. And I think that's essential. We have an enormous responsibility to help the next generation step up. And that element of empowerment is a must. And we're all very privileged, because I always say I come from indeed a small town, but I was raised in a very safe, warm environment. I mean, to give you an idea, my parents are married for 56 years. Nice. I have a younger brother, 5 years younger, warm nest. I received all opportunities to go to school, international school, study further, saw the world. Not every child is so privileged. And when a child, for example, grows up in poverty and it doesn't get the same opportunities. And I believe that's where we also as an industry need to step up to see that children get more opportunities, that they don't have to fight for that position. And we can do that through different channels. You can do that through mentorship, you can do that through internships, you can do that to supporting education programs. And of course, you need systematic change between governments and NGOs and businesses. It's a complex issue, but I don't think it means that you just can't do anything. When people say, well, it's so complex and what can I do? Well, everybody can do something. And that's, Diamonds Do Good. It's very close to my heart. And I'm also very proud that the Responsible Jewellery Council is working so closely with Diamonds Do Good And we will continue to do so in 2022 because we really want to also focus on showing progress on the 17 Sustainable Development Goals and telling the stories on how diamonds and jewelry contribute to a better world.
Talk a little bit, Iris, if you would, about how you had this leadership role, United Nations Global Compact in Belgium, and once again dealing with these SDG goals and dealing with issues like human rights, labor, anti-corruption, but also simultaneously, you have a responsibility and you had a role at the Flemish Office for Children's Rights. Talk a little bit how those government, non-governmental organization experiences helped sort of teach you and craft everything that you're doing now with the RGW. What did I say? I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, first of all, I think I was really, how would I say it? I was really honored when indeed I received the opportunity to chair the United Nations Global Compact Network Belgium. And for the people that are listening, just let me give you a little bit of background about what the United Nations Global Compact is, because it's the largest sustainability initiative in the world, and it has a UN mandate. And interestingly enough, it was founded in 1999-2000 at the World Economic Forum in Davos, when the former Secretary General Kofi Annan asked CEOs to step up in the areas of human rights, labor, and environment, and later anti-corruption came in. And he really asked companies to commit to certain universal principles. And so the UN Global Compact was born there. Now, actually, the head office is in New York, but then every country has a certain local chapter. And when the Belgian chapter wasn't founded yet, it was the Belgian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I had discussions with them, and they said, "Yeah, we're going to establish this." And so I became chair, and that was the biggest learning curve of my life, because it's interesting how, of course, governments have to come to a certain model of consensus. So diplomatic skills are really important. And I know from myself that I can be direct, maybe even sometimes a little bit blunt. So it definitely taught me to be more diplomatic. To learn to come to consensus, you have to listen a lot to different voices, be open to, to a solution that that makes sense. So sometimes, it won't be exactly what you thought it would be, but actually, the final result counts. So it will take more time. That's also something that I learned. But I think the most important experience was working with all these countries internationally on the roadmap to humanity and on those topics that were so close to my heart always, and learning a lot on local political frameworks, etc., what that meant. So I think it definitely strengthened my understanding of policy development, the importance of relationships, and I learned a lot from other industries, what they were doing on the sustainability agenda. Now, at the same time, when I was doing that role, and I was working a lot on children's rights and the role of business, it was indeed the Flemish commissioner of the parliament that asked me to chair this working group. And it was also really nice and kind. I think that my CEO at that time, Dilip Mehta from Rosy gave me the opportunity to do so. And what did I learn there? Well, again, I learned to work with a coalition of different political parties who often have very different agendas, and again, try to come to a model of consensus in the interest of children and in the interest of society. So yes, I think I learned a lot from it. And I think today, these are important skills for the organization I'm leading, because as you said, indeed, it is a complex network because you have different companies from very different parts of the supply chain with different interests. And yet what I find so amazing is when I look at my board, and I must say I have a really great board that fully supports me and empowers me to bring the RGC to the next level. They are very much committed to be united front in the interest of the industry, because we have to be united voice. Otherwise, we confuse governments, we will confuse other stakeholders, we will confuse the consumer.
Iris, what, as I'm thinking of you sitting at sort of the head of the table with these 14 member organizations, but also, as you were mentioning, all the companies that, the thousands that make up the integrated sort of network, the miners, the distributors, and I'm speaking out of turn here, but as you've, had this role, and obviously, diamonds and precious stones are beautiful, and we know about their beauty, and we talked a little bit about the emotional significance that they play in our life. We talk a lot about innovation on the show and sort of the crossover uses. We hear about some of the rare earth elements, used in cell phone manufacturing and so forth. Any interesting facts, surprises that as you're sitting at this table with these thought leaders of industry, any interesting things that we might not know about in the audience regarding whether it's precious stones, precious metals, things of that nature that maybe are exciting also in the future of the industry beyond jewelry?
Well, first of all, let me say that what I see is that there's an enormous movement going on in the industry to do better. So, and sometimes I think we're not so good in communicating our message. I mean, I think, for example, the Natural Diamond Council under David Kelly is doing super work now, bringing those stories of natural diamonds to the consumer and to broader stakeholders. But I think in general, what I see behind the scenes is really, really strong commitment from CEOs that want to accelerate. And what I also see is that the CEOs are working much closer together and having a united front, because you see, very different coalitions. So it can be LVMH with Richemont. It can be Kering with Richemont. You see all the luxury groups also, working together on different topics, which I think is a good thing, because often the brands are very aspirational and they lead the conversations. So I think they have an enormous role to lead the way and to bring everybody along the journey. So, and then you see technology coming in, and that can be from blockchain to other solutions. I think technology can be a great enabler to support sustainability. Mm-hmm. But your company, of course, has to be ready. And often in very vulnerable communities in the world, there's no technology because, the framework is not there yet, or the setup or the infrastructure is not there. But we definitely see a trend in technology solutions. We see also a trend in more transparency and reporting. So what we see is that companies do want to talk more about, what they're actually doing. And I think that will be a trend that we will continue to see. My view is probably that maybe the sustainability reporting, that the old traditional sustainability reporting will be gone in a few years, and we'll really go to probably much more data-driven ESG reporting. Mm-hmm. Because it also has value to investors, and that's something that you also see. I see also, a lot more commitment to artisanal scale mining, which really is important. I think that we as an industry have also shared responsibility to look at the informal sector and to see how can we help scale up certain communities. And especially because, as you know, women are often the most vulnerable there. Mm. And I think always an interesting example is the work of De Beers with their Gem Fair project. Look, there are many examples, and I really would invite the listeners to look at our progress report that's on our website, because it talks about what we're doing. But I think in general, I can say is that people are stepping away from sustainability as it's not about philanthropy, it's about core business strategy, mm-hmm. and it's about development and impact. And the trend that I'm seeing is that also people are stepping up in the area of supply chain management with a focus on human rights, which is absolutely needed, and which I will also personally really commit to and continue to commit to for the coming years, and at the same time, climate action. Oh, yeah. I think I do believe that it's challenging for the smaller enterprises because often they don't have the education yet or the tools to understand how they have to start the journey. And I think that's where we need to step up to give companies much more the tools to understand, what can I do as a company to innovate on climate and contribute to not just having the policy, but the implementation on climate targets. So, yeah, I must say I see wonderful things in creativity and design every day, new materials being used.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, I'm really happy to work in this industry because, yeah, it is a really beautiful industry to work in. But with that beauty comes responsibility.
It's funny because as I listen to that, coming back to my industry for a minute, you're in an industry where people love your product and they want to pay a lot for it, and I'm in an industry where they hate the product, but they have to pay for it. But yeah,
I think what's interesting is when COVID came, I was very concerned because I've got this wonderful team. I'm so happy with my team, and we've shaped and built it, and I was very concerned, what's going to happen? How is it going to have impact on the Responsible Jewellery Council? We're a membership organization. Will members stop working on this topic? Will they step away? Will it not be any more priority? And we saw a total different movement. We saw active participation, engagement, questions. Never before we received so many questions on our help desk. Companies that wanted to understand more what they can do. And I think that's very encouraging to see. But I also believe, first of all, it's a lot about value-driven leadership. So luckily, many of those family businesses that are part of the Responsible Jewellery Council, on its own, their purpose is to bring that company to the next generation. And they're committed. And then there are companies, who just want to, do even more, which is great. And so I think what our role is to continue to encourage everyone, to do more and to step up and to share that knowledge to help the whole industry advance.
Wonderful. Iris, what's coming up in 2022 that you can talk about, places that we can see you, conferences that you're going to be at, talks you're going to be giving, please. Okay.
Well, first of all, we're going to focus very much on the 2030 agenda, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. So 2022, 8 years to 2030, we know we're behind, and it has had a huge impact on that agenda too. So we'll focus on education, helping the companies, again, understand better how they can contribute through the implementation of the Code of Practices. We're launching new toolkits on human rights due diligence, on gender and climate. As I said before, because we see the necessity to help companies understand better how can they bring those topics in their own agenda of their business. We'll be doing a roadshow on that. So not just, launching the tools, but really giving companies a safe space to ask questions to experts and help them implement the tools. We'll be focusing on gender equality. We launched Generation Equality Campaign in 2019. This year, we had different roundtables all around the world where we wanted to understand, okay, what's needed to bring the industry to the next level in empowering women from mining to retail. And 2022 will be about not only launching the toolkit, but really showing much more case studies and having meaningful conversations how you can just move on and get on with that agenda. Because it is my ambition that in 2030, when I hopefully will, maybe retire, I don't know, at 60, we'll see, that I can say, well, I left that positive legacy behind to women in the industry. We'll continue to work on further updating the Code of Practices, because there's a lot of regulation coming up, new regulation on transparency reporting, on human rights due diligence. So we want our code to always be fit for purpose for our members, so that the code is really helpful for them to be compliant to new regulation. And then, of course, a really big milestone is that we are launching our lab-grown material standard, which is a big milestone also for the RJC. And I'm sure there's lots more. I'm sure when my standards team hears this podcast, they'll be very upset with me because they're working day and night on so many other projects. But these are just some projects that I'm working on. And then, of course, maybe one thing I do want to mention is we'll continue to work very closely with the United Nations Global Compact on SDG ambition, telling the stories of our members, working also with Diamonds Do Good on the SDG agenda. So yeah, lots more to do.
It's going to be an exciting coming few years for you, and we'll put all in the bio to the show. We will put all these links so people can watch and follow all these initiatives. I just have to ask before I let you go today, because I mentioned it in your bio, but two quick wrap up questions. One, are you getting any marathon running in the COVID era? And number two, I read this fascinating article that was written about you as I was going through all your materials about this Saturday morning walk that you took to get the chocolate pastry and the double cappuccino. I have to ask, you got these passions, jewelry, chocolate. Which one, if you had to give up one, or the earth explodes, which one is really the passion for Iris van der Veken?
That's a very difficult question.
That is a tough one. That's the hardest question.
Yeah, I think probably I would be, wearing my piece of jewelry around my neck and having a big piece of chocolate in my hand. Look, I find it really important to do sports.
Sure.
I love my work. I'm very passionate about my work. I also believe I work hard, and it's because I want to. I really, I think it's important to deliver excellence, and especially in an organization like RJC, we have 1,600 CEOs. I want all of them to see business value of the work that my team and I deliver every day. And that requires a positive attitude and resilience. And if there's something that I've learned over the past 20 years in my career, is that mental well-being is very important.
Yeah.
And how do I get, downtime? I love the sea and the water. So my early morning walk, and that's very early, I try to go 1 hour walking at the sea, and I run. And unfortunately, I can't do marathons anymore because I had an injury on my knee. But I still do, small runs, and yeah, it just gives me peace of mind. And sometimes I run with music. It depends on my mood. It could be, Italian hits. It can be Queen. It can be U2. It can be French chansons, whatever. But it just gives me, it gives me energy. And then yes, I loved Saturday morning, because for me Saturday is like relaxed day, and I have these I don't know, habits. I guess every human being has these habits, but I have a habit to go to a nice cafe and have a really good cappuccino, and choose a pastry, and I'll try new pastries, but it's my moment of happiness. And then reading the newspaper, I'm thinking, okay, life's good. Life is good. Be grateful. I think that's very important. It's also something that my parents have taught me. You should never forget where you come from, and you should always think about what you have, and not take that for granted. And that's why I believe so much that we have an enormous responsibility, also each one of us in this world, to try to make the world a little bit better, because we're just species, right? Human beings, we're just going to be here limited time on this earth. So how can we really take care of it and see that the next generations have a good place, to live and love and work. Yeah.
Excellent message. Excellent message. And also what you were just saying about mental health and resilience and wellness are very important in 2022 with everything the world has been going through at the same time. So really, really fascinating journey, Iris, fascinating messages. And I'm wishing you and the organization, all the best and everything you're going to be accomplishing in the coming years. For everybody that's going to be listening to this episode across the various podcast networks, or watching on the YouTube channel, you've been listening to Iris van der Veken, Executive Director and Board Member, Responsible Jewellery Council. Check out Diamonds Do Good. Google her and check out all her past initiatives with the UN Global Compact, everything that she's done with the Flemish Office of Children's Rights. Really fascinating story. Iris, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to talk to us. Thanks for everything you're doing there. And as we like to say on this show, thank you for helping to create the better tomorrow for everybody. Really fascinating story.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and I've truly enjoyed it.